The all-powerful Oz. You know that scene where the curtain? Okay. Genesis 2 has a second story of creation. And there, God is presented as a potter. He scoops up some clay, throws it on the wheel, he begins to shape it, and then he breathes his life into it. So the second story of creation says that God is not the all-powerful Oz, sham sham. He is a potter who is intricately involved in shaping how your ear goes and how your nose goes and all that. So which is it? Is God the all-powerful transcendent being? Or is God this artist who labors over each of his creation with a delicate artistic love? Well, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Now, the Hebrews could have said that God is utterly beyond and utterly close to us. But the way the Bible does it is by telling two stories. Remember when you were children? I don't know if they do it anymore. Probably not, because you have computers now. But you'd build a house of cards, and you'd like to lean them two together, and they have to balance. If they balance just right, you can build up. Well, the Bible works like that. It speaks its truth by a whole variety of voices that lean on each other and balance each other. So the Bible isn't a book, it's a library. Therefore, if you're one of those people who started in Genesis and worked your way through to Revelation, good for you. Pat your back. But don't do that. Just don't do that. You don't go to the library and say, Madam Librarian, where do I start here? Where's the first book? No, I'm going to give you a practical place of where to start. But starting at the beginning and going to the end, because you think it works like, something by Shakespeare or something by anybody, is a big mistake. So you got to learn the different voices, the different settings. Number 4. Not only is the Bible a library, it's a time capsule. A time capsule. Again, this is maybe obvious, but it has to be said because so many Bible readers kind of drag their own agenda to the Bible, and they see it. They see their own agenda in the Bible. When really it's not my agenda, this is God's agenda. And so you gotta be careful. The Bible is from long ago and far away. And those people were as smart as we are. In some ways, they were a lot smarter than we are. They had more time for silence, more time to think and ponder. So they're brilliant people, and they're inspired by God on top of that. But they're from a different culture. And so they're gonna phrase things differently, and they're going to value things differently. My token example of that is for the college students in mind. When I was a math major first. And I can remember when in high school, when you had to do big calculations in math or trigonometry or physics, you had an instrument called a slide ruler. And you don't know what that is. Okay? I can remember when I was in college, when the first Texas Instruments T, whatever it was, it could add, subtract, multiply, divide, and square root. That's all it could do. $300 when money was really, but a dollar is really a dollar. So what's the slide rule? That's only 40 years ago. Think of the sprockets that when you were children we had to put in the middle of a 45 record to make it play on a, okay? Those middle, if you gave a college student a sprocket and said, what is this? They had no idea. That's obvious, huh? Culture moves on, it moves on. And things that were familiar to us are unknown to younger people. That's a preacher like my challenge. I mean, it was time for me to leave college because I was like losing track of the world in which you all live. So the Bible is like that. Be careful about dragging your own agenda. It speaks from another age. And you're going to need help to understand it. And that's something that's important to know. 5. Simple. It is natural for us to be born fundamentalistic. Think Santa. Think Easter Bunny. Huh? But no one I know, once introduced to a faithful, respectful, contextual reading of the Bible, gives it up for a literalist approach. Literalism assumes that because God is the author of the Bible, and Catholics hold that, of every bit of it. There were human authors, but the divine author is part of it too. So you got 100% plus 100% equals 100%. It's bad math, but it's what we think about the Bible. That since God is the author, every phrase, every word in it needs to be a fact. Because modern people, almost since the Enlightenment, since the 1800, science is everything, so facts are everything. No, they're not everything by means. No one gets married because of a fact. You get married because of hopefully a commitment and love, which you can't weigh or measure. So there's profound things that cannot be phrased in a fact. In any case, so there are people who read the Bible as just full of facts. Now there are plenty of facts in the Bible. There's plenty of history in the Bible. It's a library, you remember. So there's a history section, there's a poetry section, there are fables in a sense. When Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like, that's a signal. You know, when you were little kids, you read once upon a time. And that was a signal that the kind of reading you're going to be doing now is fanciful. It might have a lesson in it, or it might just be entertaining. But the lesson in it is meant to be learned. Think of an Aesop's fable. So when Jesus uses the kingdom of heaven is like, not a fable exactly, but a parable is like that. The incidents in the parable don't have to have been ripped from the front page of the paper. But the story may be a fanciful story about a man who had 2 sons. And the youngest one said, Father, give me my share of your inheritance, my inheritance. I want you dead, I want your money, I'm going. Well, did that really had to have happened? That's not the point. The point is Jesus' desire to teach us about the Father. The Father is like the God the Father is like the Father in the parable. And the older brother, well, he is like most of us. We're kind of smug and self-assured. We kept our nose clean. We go to church on Sunday. We pray. You know, we put a buck in when we have to. So therefore, God has to love us. We've earned it. We've earned it. Where the younger, remember the setting for the prodigal son, we're going to hear it this Lent, is the Pharisees and scribes are grousing because Jesus hangs around tax collectors and sinners. And that's the occasion. Jesus tells the parable of the prodigal son because he wants the Pharisees and scribes to see themselves as the older brother. And the tax collectors and the sinners, they're the younger brother. In any case, we put our scriptures in a context. So I'll talk more about that, but we are contextual readers. If I say, my gosh, that Bible you have, it must have cost you $1,000, or it weighs a ton. Those are both exaggerations. Jesus uses exaggerations. He says, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. So tell me, how many one-eyed clergymen have you ever encountered? Okay? So obviously, we understand it to be an exaggeration, making a point. So you got to read the Bible in context. Okay. We'll come back to that. Number 6. I'm just going to say it and move on. We can come back to the questions if you have them. For Roman Catholics, there is no necessary conflict between science and religion. Period. Period. When I was here, I was invited by the faculty, some of the faculty in the biology department, when they started teaching evolution. And I was the clergyman who came in to tell the students, to relate to these students, that there are religious traditions that aren't threatened by science. And I was told then, I'm not sure if it's the case now, I was told then by the teachers who were parishioners here that a lot of our students here come from small high schools, northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, and and they're small, and it's a small community, and so the biology teachers kind of felt they were kind of walking on ice when they raised questions like the theory of evolution. And so the faculty here discovered when they gave their biology students a kind of a pretest, who among you have ever heard of, the theory of evolution? Nobody would admit to it. Now, I said to them, you don't think, really, it's being taught more than then they're letting you on. No. But students don't want to be responsible for information. I don't know anything, teach me, okay? But in any case, they reported to me that there were a lot of students here who grew up in an environment or in their public high school, got the sense that evolution could not be taught because it would violate people's religious traditions. Indeed, there are religious traditions who struggle with that, but the Catholic Church is not one of them. Go ahead, Google John Paul II and evolution, or just the title of his talk, Truth Cannot Contradict Truth, and you'll get the Catholic sense of that. Number 7, the proper answer to the question that Protestants ask, where did you Catholics get off adding those books to the Bible, is the gentle counter-question, gee, where did you Protestants get off removing them? Now, that's a huge question. It's a huge story, but it comes down to this. There was no official list. There was no official Old Testament. There was just a loose collection of scrolls. And the first loose collection of scrolls was rendered into Greek about a century and a half before Jesus. The Jews only settled on their scrolls in Hebrew after the year 70, when the temple was destroyed and Judaism had to find a non-temple way to exist. That's when Judaism sat down and said, these are our sacred books, and those are not. But by the time the Jewish community did that, about the year 100, 150, the Christian church had already separated itself. And the Christians who had left were mainly Greek speakers. So they didn't take the Hebrew scriptures with them. They took those translations done a century and a half before Jesus. They're called the Septuagint. And that loose collection is the origins of the 46 books in the Catholic canon. It was later, 2 centuries later, that Judaism made a slightly smaller selection of 39 books. And then at the Reformation, through a whole series of accidents, Luther did have the 7 books in his Bible when it was published, but over the centuries, they got dropped. And so now Protestants think that we added them. Anyway, that's more than you care to know. Okay. Number 8. There is nothing in the Gospel of Judas, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Gnostic Gospels, or any other book that National Geographic tends to splash and say, oh my God, here's the new stuff on Jesus. There is nothing in any of this stuff that's being uncovered in libraries or in archaeological digs that tells us anything new about Jesus. Those who were closest to the fire catch the most heat. And they were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These other things that get big splashes when they come out, oh, this is the true Jesus. No, they're, in every case, they're 2nd or 3rd or 4th century creations. They do tell us something very interesting to read because they show us a window into the family fight that was early Christianity. It isn't just one neat little tiny line. There was a lot of push and shove all along the way. So when you see those kinds of, when you hear on, it's usually if you watch a lot of PBS or the History Channel, or if you get books, what's the stuff that Mike gets all the time? The learning, yeah. These things you buy, the great lecture, the great, there's certain scholars who just, they like to get a name for themselves by doing something splashy and new. There isn't anything new and splashy. There's great stuff, but it's not about Jesus. It's about the early church, 2nd and 3rd century. So again, if you see that on TV, just blow it off, okay? Now, here's the real practical stuff. There's something I should have added. I'll tell it to you now. I've kind of maybe made the Bible seem a little bit different.